Welcome to the podcast. I'm Chris Graham. We're going to talk with Scott German. Boy, it's been a long time since we had Scott on a podcast. I talk to Scott pretty much every day, and I always threaten to just record the phone calls so that I could just run them as a podcast. But hey, Scott, there's a lot. It's summertime. There's not supposed to be much to talk about in college sports. The World Series is over. Football practice doesn't start for another month, but there's plenty to keep us occupied, it seems.
Oh, there's plenty. And I'm sorry for not being available that often. That witness protection program really is what they say it is.
Well, when you sign up for it and then you jump out of it, that's the only problem.
Yeah. I didn't realize you literally had to go incognito. So yeah, it's a dog days of summer, but there's certainly a lot to keep involved with, especially if you're a baseball fan like we are. So we've fallen to major leagues, and of course, we had UVA baseball up until unfortunately a week ago. So, yeah, it's not going to be a long off season because the ACC football meetings are. I was just looking at it, less than a month away now.
That's right. The NBA draft is tonight. Virginia likely to have at least one guy. Ryan Dunn will go somewhere in the first round. Some of us who watched him play for 2 years are still wondering about
That's
that.
a
But
head scratcher. That's a head scratcher.
defensively, he is NBA ready. Offensively, I'm not sure if he's ready for the YMCA. But hey, that's up to the NBA to decide. And then Reese Beekman probably not going to be drafted. If he hears his name, great. If not, he's going to be one of the top undrafted free agents out there. So, the draft is 2 nights this year, Scott. Kind of weird. It's only 2 rounds, but it's 2 nights. So I guess the second round guys get their due tomorrow night. MLB draft is a few weeks away. They moved it back a couple years ago to July. And so we'll see a number of, I think it's between 5 and 7 UVA guys go in the draft, depending, and relatively high in the draft next month. And we'll have more breakdown on that as the next few weeks play out. We're not that far from football season. You mentioned, Scott, the ACC football kickoff. The media event is coming up in a few weeks in Charlotte. We'll both be there. And we got a letter. I run mailbag columns, and I've started doing that a few months ago. I run them, a couple times a week, where I get great questions from our reader base, our listener and viewer base, and got one from a reader named Gary. And I'll share. It's not long, so I'll share it with you, and then we can discuss. Gary said, after having a conversation with someone I believe to be a significant alumni donor to UVA football, or UVA athletics, and a huge football supporter, this question pops into my mind. What if, as some believe, the wheels again fall off the Virginia football team this season with maybe 2 or 3 wins? Does the status quo remain the same, or do Carla Williams and Tony Elliott get flushed down the drain together? From my conversation, I get the feeling that prolonging the inevitable is not an option. So Virginia's 2-10, 3-9. What happens next, Gary?
I
Uh,
read that, and I will say, you get a lot of you turn a lot of those email questions into very interesting uh, columns. So your readers actually are very they participate in your site very much because they give you a lot of ideas.
well, and I gotta, I'm showing off some of the new gear here from Team AFP.
I
For
love it.
if you're listening on the podcast, you're missing it. But if you're watching on YouTube, so a few weeks ago, I threatened to take the jab from Mike Barber in one of his stories about the Tony Bennett contract situation, where he referred to me as being fringe media. And I said, you know what? I'm going to get T-shirts made up with that and wear them to the football games. Well, my wife upped the ante. She, without me knowing, she had a few made up for me, and they came in the mail today. So I'm wearing the first of my fringe media outline here. They'll come to stores near you before too long. No, yeah, the
And,
reader.
and
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, and the
I'll send you
the the
yours, Scott. You can wear yours to the games too if you
the
want.
reality of that is that the fringe media is going to be around a lot longer than what used to be considered mainstream media. They're going to be, I don't know what they're going to be evolve into, but we know the numbers, and those numbers aren't good for those guys.
Yeah, the media row on
But
basketball.
I read that question and your response, and I kind of thought, well, do I agree with that or do I not? But sort of still on the fence about it because, well, first of all, you and I both know we don't want to see that. We'd love to see a 6, 7 win season.
And I think
And
we're going to see a 6 or 7 win season.
I hope you're right because it makes sitting in Scott Stadium a lot more bearable when you're actually think you've got a chance to win some games and when you show up knowing you're just wasting 5 or 6 hours. But so and I read your response as to why there wouldn't be a change if a disastrous season takes place. But you you almost kind of contradicted yourself into you said that this is the year you think could be that 6-6, 7-5 type season, and that next year might be the year that we take a step back because of the schedule and the graduations. Well, what happens if this season does indeed, whatever the reader said, the wheels fall off the car? What happens in that scenario if, as you said, next year may be even more difficult?
Oh, well, one, too many UVA sports fans are self-loathing, I think is the term I've seen thrown out there. It's assumed that the wheel for a lot of folks, it's assumed the wheels are going to fall off. So I don't assume that. I want to just start by saying the same thing that I said on Frank Maloney's show that disappointed the hell out of him. He had me on his show a couple months ago, and I think he wanted me to. It was right after the end of spring football practice. I think he wanted me to lead a segment where we could bash UVA football for 20 minutes, and I'm ready to bash whatever needs to be bashed, but I look at where things are with the program this year, and I think it's going to be pretty good. The lines are strong. Offensive line's got 7 guys back who played significant snaps last year. A couple of transfers who are coming in with good pedigrees. Defensive line's got a lot of guys back, a lot of old guys back, 6th and 7th year seniors because of the COVID and the other redshirt year from 2022, the unfortunate redshirt year of 2022. I like our quarterbacks. I don't, the one area that I don't feel really good about is running back, but we haven't had good running backs at UVA for a while. So I think this team is going to be good this year. When I say good, is it going to compete for the national championship? No, I'm not saying that, but I think it could win 6 or 7 or even 8 games. And it'll play in a cold weather bowl. The reason I look ahead to next year, next year being 2025 as a potential step back year, is because there would be some losses on the lines. The lines have veteran guys this year. Um, the Those veteran guys won't be back for 2025. So there'd have to be some development going on even now in the summertime and then in the fall next spring to have some guys fill in some of those holes. We'll have the quarterback back. We'll have Anthony Calandria back anyway. I don't know if he's going to start this year, if Muskett's going to start this year. Both those guys will see action. We saw that last year. They're both about the same level of productivity. I think the line play will be the only question going into next year, but this is the kind of thing that happens with coaches. Go back to the George Welsh days. Go back if Virginia Tech fans would remember this, and Virginia fans who hate Virginia Tech would remember this. Years 4, 5, and 6 of George Welsh and Frank Beamer weren't great years because you kind of have that initial wave of success. Then you've got to replenish with your guys, and your guys are younger. So there's a year or two after your first good year where you kind of step back a little bit. That's where we were with Bronco Mendenhall, and Carlo Williams wasn't able to be patient enough to withstand Bronco Mendenhall having 2 500 seasons. And that's why we are where we are now. Okay. So next year's a step back year, as far as I'm concerned, Scott. But to me, the judgmental year should be and has to be and was designed to be by contract the 5th year, 2026. And so I think, outside of any reason for cause to fire somebody, and losing is not for cause. For cause would be some moral turpitude issue, DUI, drug bust. Something like that. Outside of something like that, you don't fire a football coach 3 years in. You don't fire a football coach 4 years in. I think, if he has the year, Scott, that Gary and the booster that Gary says he talked to, thinks could be possible this year, another 2 or 3 or 4 win season. And Tony Elliott goes into 2025 maybe with a little bit more of a hot seat. Um, and if 2025 then is another 3 or 4 or 5, 2 or 3 or 4 win season, not bowl season, then 2026 is probably the last year. And maybe at that point, at the end of 2025, you say, well, we're not going to re-sign you after 2026. So we're going to give you the option to just go ahead and quit now, and call it a resignation, or you're a lame duck in 2026. That's the worst case to me, is 2 bad years. And then we have to make a decision at the end of next season, 2025. I don't think there's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater this season.
And I do have some optimism. I know the personnel look not as well as you do, but I do know. I think what concerns me is I think the starting they did so much work to improve the offensive line, and I think the offensive line is going to be much better. But where I'm concerned is where do we have, or do we have, the depth that can offset the injuries that we know are going to come? That's just going to happen. It's almost like an injury to a pitcher now in Major League Baseball. You know you're going to lose guys on that O-line, D-line as the season progresses. Do we have enough depth 5th, 6th game into the season when we start having to have the next man up to grind it out, to get those, to win some of those toss-up games?
I mean, 7 guys are back from last year's line that played a decent amount of snaps, over 100 snaps. And we did add a couple of guys off the transfer portal who are guys who will compete for snaps and can be depth. So it's a situation that's much better than year one of Tony Elliott, certainly, when all the Bronco guys pretty much transferred out. And it was the makeshiftest of makeshift lines you'll ever see for a Power Five program. Last year there was a mix of some returning guys and then some new guys. This year it's we're not going to have to rush true freshmen into the mix. We can redshirt those guys and let them get bigger in the weight room. Some of the guys that we had in the most recent signing class. So no, I think that the depth is there on both the lines. I like the depth at wide receiver that we have as well. And so, to me, the question marks might be, again, running back and linebacker. But the secondary looks good to me. I mean, I think there's a lot to like about this team. Now, we're talking around the question that Gary had, which was, what about this 3-win season thing? What happens with a 3-win season? I'm getting to, again, I don't think, and I can't think that anybody who is a decision maker or should be a decision maker would think 3rd year of a new coach needs to be the make or break year. We all know that to use Al Groh's terminology from back in the early 2000s, if you want to judge the cook and how good he makes the dinner, you have to let him go to the grocery store. And to get a good football team, you got to let the coach go out there and do some things on the recruiting trail. And let's be honest, as much as Bronco Mendenhall had this program in the Orange Bowl in 2019, the recruiting was completely out of whack from what a Virginia coach should be. He was recruiting the west of the Mississippi, west of the Rocky Mountains. And that was not sustainable for whoever was going to replace him, whether it was going to be the way it was a couple of years ago or 10 years from now. You need to recruit your home area. You need to recruit Virginia. Virginia is a really good state in terms of high school football prospects. We know that because Penn State and Notre Dame and Clemson and Michigan and Florida tell us that it's a good state for recruiting high school football prospects, because they come in and take them. But Mendenhall just didn't prioritize Virginia. And so Elliott's had to go out, he and his staff have had to go out and mend fences. And it's taken time to do that, so that those kids then are thinking about Virginia as an opportunity, in addition to those other big name schools. So you can't fix a football program, college football program overnight. It takes time.
So I'm going to give you another, not being Mr. Negative, but I think the team can improve this year, one loss record. But what do you think? Is the schedule going to allow it? Is the schedule going to, are we going to be able to navigate that schedule? Because there's a lot of games on there that on paper, we're not going to be favored to win. In fact, I just saw an article, or I just looked at a site on social media last night. It was tied to one of the Las Vegas sites. We're only favored in 2 games, and one of those is at home at Richmond, and the other is at Coastal Carolina.
I don't know if I buy this, Scott. That the Vegas is looking at, they're not looking at what they've gotten the hopper. They be Virginia's football program's gotten a hopper. They're looking at what they saw from the last 2 years. It's a 3-win team from the last 2 years, 6-16 the last 2 years. This supposedly murderer's row schedule. Let's look at this murderer's row schedule. Richmond first week, yeah, that's a 1AA team. At Wake Forest. This isn't
That's
Wake
a
Forest.
tough. That's going to be a crucial early season game.
It's a
Though,
crucial
Chris.
game, but this isn't Wake. I mean, we're not talking about Wake Forest even a couple years ago with Sam
Now,
Barton leading to the championship game.
now we're looking at more like the old Wake Forest teams.
We're getting there, and it's at Wake Forest. It doesn't matter where that is. Wake Forest doesn't
No,
draw fans in their own games. Then
no.
we got Maryland at home. Maryland, you beat us last year 42-14. That game was a lot closer than it looked, and they don't have their quarterback back. Tagovailoa is out of there now. Then we're at Coastal, Boston College at home. Louisville at home in October is the first game where I say, yeah, that one's, and we almost beat them last year and should have beat them. Had a 1 touchdown lead in the fourth quarter last year. Then you're at Clemson. Yeah, that's obviously tough. Carolina at home. We've played well with them, even in the years we've lost recently. At Pitt, Pitt won 3 games last year. At Notre Dame's tough. SMU here in Charlottesville, and then at Virginia Tech. I'm hearing about this being a murderer's row schedule. I don't know that I see it. This is not a bad schedule. I mean, the only games that I look at that where you say going into the season, oh man, these are the tough ones. Maybe the Louisville game, but that's at home. At Clemson, no doubt. And then at Notre Dame, there's 12 games. Those are 3 games right there where I say, yeah, those are the ones maybe you write off. There's 9 other games. I'm not saying you win all 9 of them, but I don't look at that and say, man, there is just no way we're going to win any games this year. That is not that kind of schedule.
Yeah, and you also have to take into consideration as the season progresses, other teams that you thought were going to be good might not be as good. Injuries may plague them. Clemson's going to be an interesting. There's a lot of people down in South Carolina that are really watching this Clemson situation closely because, if they have another season where they're not a factor in the college football playoffs, then Dabo could be feeling some heat there. So
Clemson hasn't been Clemson since Tony Elliott left and Brent Venables left. Tony for Virginia and
exactly.
Brent Venables for Oklahoma. They ain't been the same since.
So you just don't know. What looks like a tough game or an easy game. Maybe Louisville. We're talking about that game as, oh, that should be a game we could win. Well, what if Louisville surprises people and they,
No,
all of a sudden they're a good team.
They were a top 15 team and but we almost beat them at their place last year. And we had a lead in the fourth quarter in a game that was marred a bit by the Paris Jones injury. I mean, you don't want to have excuses, but we had a touchdown lead, lost by a touchdown. That was that, and another one of those games where we had a blocked punt for a touchdown be part of the equation.
Yeah, we're going to have to fix some special teams issues, and because if you're going to win those toss-up games, those special teams comes in. The way you play in that is critical. So
2 games last year against teams that ended up in the top 25. JMU for a second week of the season home opener, and then the Louisville game that we lost by 1 score, and one score was a punt block for a touchdown. Yeah,
no cell phones in the locker rooms.
And also the NC State game, we lost on a last-second field goal that was a last-second field goal because on the first one we had a penalty, and the guy missed it on the first opportunity, gave him 15 yards, and he made the second one. So, and NC State won 9 games, or I think they won 10 games when they won their bowl game. So, I mean, you're talking about 3 teams that either won 9, 10, or 11 games, and Virginia was in all 3 of those, could have won any or all 3 of those games if not for special teams. This is what I think, and this team's a year older now. Plus, yes, the prep recruiting didn't go so well, didn't go so well. I think his prep recruiting, Tony's was ranked 80th this year, but the transfer portal recruiting was in the top 25 nationally. He filled a lot, and that's going to be the more immediate thing anyway. Your prep recruiting is guys who are going to help you in 2 or 3 years. Your transfer portal recruiting are guys who are going to help you now. And Tony he filled some important slots with the transfer portal this year. That's another reason I think I'm when I say I'm optimistic, again, it's not going to be a 10-win season. We're not going to be in Charlotte in December competing for the ACC championship, but this is going to be a better team.
And it hasn't been long since we were in Charlotte in the
5 years
ACC
ago.
championship game.
Yeah, five
And
years ago is not that long
for
ago.
some strange reason, that coach is now out coaching in the Nomads of New Mexico. So
And he's got more guy. I wrote this when he got that job, Scott. I don't know if you remember because I'm just kind of remembering when Bronco got that job like in late December. He hired pretty much everybody that used to be on his staff at UVA. Um, his New Mexico staff knows its way around grounds at least as well as Tony Elliott's staff knows their way around grounds, except they're all the way out in New Mexico.
right. Yeah. So, and I don't
It's
think you're
pretty
going to see
bad.
New Mexico on our schedule anytime soon.
Don't see that happening.
Not as long as the current AD is in position. So I want to transition from that to a question that we talked about on the phone. You haven't got not that I've seen, you haven't got an email question about this, but this is probably that pink elephant in the corner of the room as far as UVA football. So I was at the grand opening of the new football support operations center. It is spectacular. I will say that. Doesn't have a roller coaster or a bowling alley, but aside from that, it is a night and day improvement over what we did have, because what we did have was nothing.
What
So
11,000 square feet, the McHugh Center was what we had before this.
yeah, being held together with Elmer's glue. Because I've been in that building many times, and it's
Oh, it,
atrocious.
it opened before I went to school at UVA, which I went to school at UVA in 1990. My 30th year reunion is this year. That's how old that building is. Yeah, yeah.
And we've been competing for recruits with that building. So that's all done. We've moved ahead. We've got this football supports facility. Improvements are going on at Scott Stadium. We've got a new scoreboard, jumbo board that, from what I've heard, the International Space Station can see when they pass over.
Well, you go to NFL games, you go to Ravens games a lot.
It's as big as anything in an NFL stadium.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be the first game or two that people go to. It's going to be hard to like not watch the screen the whole time instead of watching the field. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have all that, but what we talked about on the phone was that with that the university seemingly has not addressed or doesn't want to address is even with NIL aside, can Virginia be competitive with the status quo that's currently in place with academics? As far as the rigors of the academics at the University of Virginia, are you going to be able to recruit enough? And you said 50, and I agree with that. 50 players that are going to be okay with the academics at UVA.
You need the number 50 is for the people listening or watching. I've been using this number for years now, probably dating back to the Mike London era. You're too deep. What you call your too deep. That's your depth chart in football. There's 11 positions on offense, 11 on defense. So that's 22 times 2 is 44. I'm throwing in the kickers, your punter and your place kicker, even your because your long snapper is not just some guy. That's a very specialized position to be able to snap the ball to the punter, snap the ball to the holder on the place kicks. You might even have a different kickoff specialist. So it's 50. 50 is your number. You have to have 50. To me, if you're going to be competitive with Clemson and Florida State and the playoff teams, there's now 12 in a playoff every year, and they're starting this year. If you're going to be competitive with those programs, you've got to have 50 guys who can be competitive with those because they have 50. They probably have more than 50, but they have 50 who are ready to play now. Alabama, Clemson, Florida State, all those, they have 50 who are ready to play every week. And they're 54 stars, they're 50 whatever they are. They're 50 guys who think they're going to play in the NFL. They probably aren't all going to play in the NFL, but okay. Virginia traditionally, I mean, because of the admissions, and it's more than the academic rigors. I think it's just the admissions, the folks there. Al Groh proved this point way back. It was 2006. Al Groh had a recruiting class that the major recruiting services ranked in the top 10 nationally. Al Groh is an alum of UVA. He was a graduate assistant coach in his early days at UVA before going on to the NFL. He was head coach at Wake, went back to the NFL, then was the head coach at Virginia for 6 years before 2006. And then in 2006, he signs a class of 24 guys that, again, is ranked in the top 10 in the recruiting services. 8 of the guys didn't qualify. Now, I wrote back then, Al Groh didn't all of a sudden, after 35 years of being a UVA guy, fail to understand that, UVA admissions has standards and he couldn't get these 8 guys in. He just didn't forget. He didn't overlook 8 guys' academic records. He was proving a point
He was
that
proven for it. Absolutely.
he got that these are the guys I need if you want me to win championships, and you won't let me get them in school. He proved that point in 2006. 3 years later, he was fired because he had 3 losing seasons out of 4 years. Mike London then had 5 losing seasons in 6 years. Bronco Mendenhall only had 2. He had 2 winning seasons. We've had basically 3 winning seasons since Al Groh proved that point. And so we are where we are. We put up, our guys love them. They put so much heart and effort into it. The coaches all do, but we've got maybe 10 or 15 guys each year who are trying to compete with the 50 guys that Clemson and Florida State put out there. I would argue Carolina. Carolina recruits great. They just don't coach them great. But since Mac Brown,
they have the opposite thing going on in Carolina.
yeah, they get the guys. They're letting the guys in, and
they just don't do anything with them.
They don't do anything. And Miami's the same way. Miami's recruited great for 20 years and can't win with them. We can't get the guys in, and so God love them. The guys who are in the program, they work their asses off to be able to do what they do, but there's just not enough of the accumulated talent at the level that you need them at. If UVA football wants to compete for ACC championships, like every other sport at UVA does. I wrote a story today, Scott, for our listeners out there, viewers out there. The Learfield Cup, the Learfield Directors Cup rankings came out today, and Virginia finished 5th in the nation. We were ahead of everybody in the ACC. Carolina was 7th, and then you go on down. And I've got the story on there. Tech was somewhere in the 40s. I mean, so we compete in every other sport at the top level. But at football, we hamstring ourselves because we just don't let, you can compete in basketball, for example. Men's basketball has 13 scholarships. Tony only plays 8 guys.
You don't need as many players.
In football, you need 50 guys, right? So if our folks aren't going to let Tony Elliott recruit 50 guys, or whoever the next coach might be, 50 guys, this is why I say, and I've been as guilty of this as anybody, being hard on Tony Elliott. I've been since I started writing these stories this spring. Looking into the academic side of this, this is where people might have noticed, and if you hadn't noticed, now you'll notice now. I'm softening my stance on Tony Elliott and in general, whoever's the football coach in the future, because okay, so Gary's booster wants this to be the make or break year for Tony Elliott. And if we fire Tony Elliott, the next guy, unless we change how we admit football student athletes into UVA, is going to have the same set of problems that Tony Elliott has, that Bronco Mendenhall had, that Mike London and Al Groh had. And people ask me, I've gotten this question, Scott, and I wonder, I don't know that I've written any columns about this, but I've gotten the question, well, how did George do it? My thought on how George did it was, okay, you think back to the 80s and 90s. We didn't have 24/7. We didn't have rivals. We didn't have On3 ranking everybody. We didn't have the ease of the internet making it so that kids and coaches, high school coaches, could send their videos out to coaches very easily. They'd have to actually make a tape, put it on VHS, send it in the mail, get it there. Then the coach would have to watch it. Now you can just email clips of guys, right? And so now coaches know so much more about athletes all over the place. Back in the 80s and 90s, the Terry Kirbys and the Chris Slades weren't quite as sought after by the schools outside of our area. I think Kirby was looking at Penn State and was pretty close to committing to Penn State and decided at the last minute to go to Virginia. But for the most part, the guys that George got in the 80s and 90s that he built the UVA program around, a lot of them were Virginia guys. And George did a great job of keeping those guys in state. We got about 60% of Virginia's best high school football players. Virginia Tech got about 35% of them, and then a couple of guys a year would go somewhere else. But we kept the Virginia guys here. We're not keeping the Virginia guys here because everybody else in the world knows that Virginia is a hotbed for football, high school football. And now we're not getting the top guys. And those guys, Terry Kirby was the valedictorian of his high school class. I mean, that's a perfect situation. Man, he's the best running back recruit in 1988, and he's also a smart kid. Yeah, perfect for UVA. The Barbers were top students at their high school in Roanoke. Oh, look at that. We got twins. I mean, one's going to play running back. One's going to be a NFL Hall of Fame safety. Boy, they're going to come and fall into your lap. Those kids aren't falling in our laps anymore.
You can, and I cut my teeth on the football teams in the 80s and knew the coaches and assistant coaches and the players and still do call them friends. I don't want to say we got lucky, but you just reeled off some names. Chris Slade and Terry Kirby were number 1 and 2 in their class academically.
Yeah.
At Tabb High School.
I had classes with them when I was a student at UVA. They were smart kids. They were obviously smart guys.
The Barbers were excellent academic students.
They were common school students at UVA.
Anthony Poindexter was a honorable student at Liberty or Bedford or some Liberty
Bedford. Yeah.
Ray Savage was a academic honor roll student at Newport News. These kids that came that were impact players, Ray Savage, I'm thinking Mike, the offensive line, Mike Battle, Joe Hall, they were all academic ACC players. So
Tom Burns was a nuclear engineering major at UVA.
Exactly.
3.93 GPA nuclear engineering major at UVA.
So George kind of caught a break there because some of these great athletes that he was recruiting also turned out to be great students. And Chris Slade's final 2 choices were Virginia and Alabama. Not much difference at the time between Alabama and Penn State. But so having said all that, so if you had total control of this, and we're not talking about dumbing down the academics, turning UVA into, you name whatever joke athletic school that we can think of that pretends to be, to educate players. What when we talked about this over the phone, and I agree 100%, but I'll let you do what's the solution?
To me, the solution is for the folks in academics to get a little bit off their high horse, because I've thought this since I was a student at UVA 30 plus years ago. I had roommates who were baseball players, and I had friends who played football and lacrosse. People I knew really well, and it even burned me then to think, oh well, they're jocks. Well, to be successful enough in high school to get a school the caliber of UVA to have you on their radar from a recruiting standpoint, you don't just start playing your sport and then it's just natural. You work your butt off at it. From the time you're in little league and then through middle school and in high school. I mean, and it takes work, but also, I mean, you've got to be smart at that sport. So why don't we put the same level of attention to virtuosity in academics? I mean, in athletics that we do academics or in art, to be a very successful artist, whether it be visual artist or a music artist or whatever the case may be, you put so much time and effort in developing those skills, think of the amount of time that athletes put into developing their skills. And so, why don't we put more emphasis in terms of admissions and say, all right, well, the standard for UVA, let's just say, for sake of argument, if you're an in-state student, if you have 1,300 on SATs and a 3.8 grade point average, that's getting you into UVA. Well, but this football player's only got 1150 and a 3.5. Yeah, but and not to just reward them for being football players, but also, man, they've worked themselves into being one of the top recruits in their class. I would assume that the admissions folks have some leeway for, well, this kid is a great potential drama student here, a great potential playwright or actor or actress, singer, whatever the case may be. But damn, their GPA is only 3.65 and their SATs are only 1250. That's kind of right on the wrong side of getting into UVA. You know, I would be surprised if we don't make those decisions, and I think we need to be a little more careful with just turning our nose up to athletic virtuosity in that sense. And maybe it sounds like I'm creating something out of the air there, but I've been thinking about this for 30 years. I think that the academics folks need to be a little more cognizant of that virtuosity, and also understand that the kids who get into UVA who have success at the high school level in athletics, who've created that success for themselves in the high school level at athletics, um, can apply that dedication it took to get to that high level of athletics to their academics. Now, and also knowing then that at UVA, like a lot of other schools, but UVA we know well, there are great academic supports in place for student athletes at UVA. And also just the fact that these kids, most of these kids, the commercial says it on the NCAA, especially during the NCAA basketball tournament, 99% of all athletes aren't going to play in a pro sport. They're going to go pro in something other than sports. Um, Everybody, of course, who goes to a place like UVA thinks, hey, I got a chance of being an NFL player, NBA player, WNBA, MLB, whatever the case may be. But most of them aren't going to be. But you know what they can have at the end of 4 years? They can have a UVA degree, and that will change their lives. So, isn't that part? And Scott, you said this, but isn't that part of what a university's mission is supposed to be?
To create an opportunity for an individual to be successful.
I mean, in my own case, now, socioeconomically, I probably come from where I probably fit socioeconomically more with football players than I do, because there are a lot of the non-revenue sports at UVA. If you play, I mean, I don't want to cast any aspersions, but if you're a swimmer or a field hockey player, or, name a bunch of sports like tennis and stuff like that, those are high cost of entry sports even when you're a youth, a lot of training, a lot of, tennis lessons or swimming lessons and that kind of thing. Um, and those tend to be a little more socioeconomically upper middle class kind of sports. Football tends to be the more working class sport. I came from a very working class background. I grew up, my parents were teen parents. I grew up in a trailer park. My parents split when I was young. I grew up poor, free and reduced lunch in school and all that stuff. Now, I had to get into UVA because of academics, and I did, fortunately for me. But man, that changed my life. And as a result, hopefully having a positive impact on a lot of other people's lives through what I do with Augusta Free Press. And so if we take and say for football players who, again, I think tend to, I mean, I'm not, I don't have numbers in front of me, but I can guarantee you that socioeconomically, the players are going to skew more towards working class and lower middle class backgrounds. You give those kids an opportunity at a UVA degree, and whether they make the NFL or not, they are going to change the world because of that UVA degree. And so you're not just giving a kid a chance to play football at UVA. You're giving them a chance to play football and then a chance to change their lives and their kids' lives and their grandkids' lives.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Now, I will say that having spoke to someone that I do know, and you probably wouldn't disagree with this, is very knowledgeable to the fact that said when it comes to getting athletics athletes into the university, the overwhelming obstacle is getting them accepted.
Yeah.
Keeping them in is relatively easy.
Right.
Because a lot of the kids that get there actually improve academically because they're given more help than they've ever had. They're taught how to budget their time, which a lot of kids, that's all you need to do. You just need to tell them, you just need to teach them how to budget time, how to budget time to study, how to budget time for downtime. Getting them in is the obstacle.
Yeah.
So why is it so difficult for the powers that be to understand that just make it a little easier for some of these kids that didn't come from the private elite schools, which you're not going to get. You're going to get those in lacrosse and field hockey and swimming. You're going to
Swimming
get the
and tennis.
majority of those players are private school players,
Yes, they are. Yes.
private high school. They just are. Look at the roster. It's not
Oh,
just
yeah.
me
Yeah.
guessing. That's the facts. Football is different. Most of those kids,
Even baseball's like that. I mean, we talked about
even
that during
baseball is private schools. A lot of
well,
private
not just
schools.
and also it's a high cost of entry kind of thing. They got to play travel ball from the time they're 8 or 9 years old.
Which is thousands of dollars every summer. I know. I have a dear friend that had a kid that played and is now playing college, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a year in summer, just for summer
just
travel
for
ball.
summer ball, yeah. And I don't
And
think
if you're not playing summer travel ball, you're not playing Division I baseball.
I'm going to speak here, maybe out of turn, but I haven't. So I haven't studied the pictures on the roster page of UVA baseball to know like the guys who didn't play a lot this year, the relievers, and then the utility guys who didn't play a lot. But from the guys who did play a lot, Scott, I'm thinking of one African American player, Jay Woolfolk, um, and he even came from
The
a private school.
opportunity's not there. And that's not just for college. That's probably the reason you don't see a lot of African American players in Major League Baseball. It's an all-time low this year, all-time low.
4 to 6% in the last year, and we of course just celebrated the Negro League's Memorial Game from the Birmingham Barons Stadium that the Black Barons played in. Yeah,
Which was an awesome experience to watch.
it was. I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I think of myself as a student of baseball history, and I still learned a lot. Man, Reggie Jackson went off early in that one. That
He
was
did.
needed.
He did. Very
That was needed.
powerful. Very
Yeah.
powerful.
So
But you're right. These kids, these inner city blacks, kids in high school, they don't have a chance to play travel ball, and that's why you're not seeing that many African Americans in Major League Baseball now. Most of it's Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and
Japanese players coming over from
Japanese.
yeah. So to your question though, Scott, your question was about what is it at UVA that holds this back? And I've identified this and written about this, I mean, more recently, but also in years past. I think there's just this weird like dichotomy at UVA. We want to be great in athletics because we want to be UVA people. I mean, we want to be great at if we're going to do something, we're going to be the best at it. That's the UVA attitude. And that's what I love. That's what drew me to want to go to school at UVA when I was a kid, even growing up in a trailer park. I wanted to go somewhere where everybody wanted to be the best. But also though at UVA, we want to be the best, but we also want to be Colgate Darden is the example I want to come up with here. Colgate Darden was the president of UVA in the 1950s. We had ourselves a good coach at the time, and his name's escaping me right this second, but had a run of really good seasons. And then in the 1951 season, that team finished 8-1 and was number 13 in the national polls and got invited to the Orange Bowl. So we played in the Orange Bowl in 2019. That's not the first time we got the invite. We got the invite in 2019 or in 1952. And Colgate Darden did not want to. He refused the bid on behalf of UVA athletics because basically there was a quote. The sum of the quote is effectively, "We don't want to be part of the big time football machine." And so the coach that we had who was successful and had led us to a run of 4 or 5 really good seasons, he quit. If we're not going to try, I'm leaving. And we didn't play our first bowl game, Scott. So we were invited to the 1952 Orange Bowl. We didn't play our first bowl game until George Welsh took us to the Peach Bowl in 1984. That's the sin. That's the wages of the sin of UVA football being too good in 1952. We sentenced ourselves to 30 years of mediocrity. And even then, we hired George Welsh. He has the run he has. There's the quote from John Castine, former president of UVA, who referred to sports as being a jocular pursuit. This was like in 2007 or 2008. This is not that long ago. So there is this undercurrent within the UVA community of, okay, we want to be the best at everything, And if it means athletics, we want to be the best at athletics, but I don't know about that football thing. I don't know if we want to be the best at that too.
Yeah, the other old saying about the university is that they wanted to be Harvard and Yale Monday through Friday, and Alabama and Penn State on Saturday, which is you can't do that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it earlier. The university is successful in everything they do athletically. Why is it so hard to get? And I think our conversation, I referenced it to being all the dots are connected except that last dot, and that last dot to connect for a successful football program. And again, success being modestly successful. We're not talking about competing for the national championship, being in that college football playoff field of contention every year. We're talking about 7, 8 wins. Why is it so difficult to understand? They got to connect that last dot, and that last dot is simply make it a little easier to get some of these kids in school.
And what comes to mind for me, when I was a student at UVA in the 90s, the way life works, my lifelong best friend since then, the guy that was one of my roommates first year, just by chance, his stepfather was on the board of visitors at UVA, and also helped run at the time the Virginia Student Aid Foundation, now Virginia Athletics Foundation, and uh he was part of a group. So this is the 90s when what I'm talking about. A group of alums from the 60s, and unfortunately for the way time passes, a lot of those folks, including this guy was Robert Butch we called him, have passed on because of age. I mean, if you were a graduate of the 60s, you'd be in your 80s or even 90s now in 2024. You'd be coming or getting close to it anyway. But those guys in the 60s lived through the era post Colgate Darden where UVA athletics was in the tank. We didn't try very hard. We lost everybody all the time, and going to the games was more about dressing up and drinking bourbon than it was about trying to watch a team win a game. But those guys came through and said, you know what? We think Virginia can succeed. And so they're the ones who invested money, starting with, let's hire a coach in Terry Holland, let's hire a coach in George Welsh, let's do something about. Eventually, they did something about U-Haul. They expanded Scott Stadium. You made all the stuff. All the stuff came from that group of the '60s that took that moved into positions in the Board of Visitors and the Virginia Student Aid Foundation, now Virginia Athletics Foundation in the '90s. Um, but I wonder if because those guys pretty much have either died off or just kind of moved on, and they're not influential anymore. I wonder if that because those guys were willing to do what it took, money wise and everything else wise, to get UVA football, UVA athletics to be on par with everybody else in the country. And in the 90s, it's hard to argue that we were not very close to being there. We were number one in football for 3 weeks in 1990. Top 10 again in 1995, top 10 again in 1998. The basketball program went to two Final Fours in the 80s, an Elite Eight is under Jeff Jones in 1995. I mean, those guys, they oversaw something that had fruits of success. But yeah, there's still that last hurdle, and it's just football. I mean, the Learfield Directors Cup standings tell us we're pretty good at everything else. To be number 5 in the nation in the accumulated points with a football program that wins 3 games. Football is
And
not giving
Chris,
us any points there.
and Chris, here's the other the flip side of that is if they continue to play nice and continue to ignore how to connect that last dot, as football becomes more expensive to be competitive, like we just found out, NIL, you're going to have to, it's going to cost money. Those non-revenue sports, other than basketball, those non-revenue sports are going to soon start suffering.
Well, I mean, I've done
The revenue won't be there.
some stories on this because I did the math on this spring. The football program, despite being a 3-win a year program the last couple of years, still turns an operating surplus. I don't want to call it a profit because technically, I don't know how this works. This is chicanery, but technically, at college athletics programs are nonprofits, so it's whatever. But the football program still, with the stadium half empty on Saturdays and winning 3 games and playing our games when we play on TV, we play at 12 o'clock. If they can make us play at 11, and we did play at 11 once actually a couple years ago, they would make us play at 11. Despite that, we still profit effectively $20 million a year in football. So imagine what we would do if we started winning games and filling the stadium up. We'd be 30 or 40 million a year. But the difference is the non-revenue sports, and I hate to say that includes baseball. I found that out with one of my records requests. The non-revenue sports lose about 20 million a year. So we break even because of football. And so, yeah, if I don't know that it can get any lower. Our season ticket number, when I reported on it here recently, was at an all-time low for the time of year that I was reporting it. I did a public records request on that, and it was around 14,000. And our all-time season ticket high was in 2004, I think it was, at 39,000. So we got a ways to go to get there. We're not going to get there, but I don't know that we can get any lower than we are now, Scott. I don't want to find that out, but I don't think we can get any lower. But yeah, I mean, we hear the talk about, the non-revenue sports having to take cheaper modes of transportation. The baseball team, I think we understand, had to fly commercial to Boston for the Fenway game. A baseball team flying commercial doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, think about how hard it is for 2 people or 1 person to fly commercial. Imagine flying an entire baseball team plus support staff plus all their equipment, their bats, their gloves, catcher's equipment, all the pitch comp stuff. Imagine, oh my God, I can't even think of that, Scott, how hard that had to be to do that.
Well, and we know for a fact that they did because they flew out of Dulles Airport. If they were
They
flying
flew,
charter, they would have
and they
flown
didn't
out
even
of
fly.
Charleston.
They didn't even fly out of Richmond. They flew out of Dulles. We flew out of Richmond. We had the sense to fly out of Richmond, Scott.
Right. Yeah. So, the world is revolving around football. So if any of the board of visitors or whomever the alumni that is supporting this don't connect that last dot, then we're just going to continue to flap our wings or
Yeah.
pedal upstream in the that's what's going to happen. We've got to connect that last dot, make it a little easier. I'm not a graduate of UVA. I'm not saying advocating, oh, just turn it into some glorified, community college. And I don't even want to use that word. That's disrespectful to community colleges, but make it so that you can get some of these kids, fringe kids, not friends, fringe kids, get them in school. Get them in school. The help is there. I know that for a fact. They have as much help as they possibly could want. And you'd be surprised what they would do. Challenge them a little bit. Don't shut the door because their SATs are 500 points less than they should be, or their GPA's half a point lower. Let them in.
Well, and here's the other reality. It's been over 20 years. I think it was 1998, 1999 that UVA did its last significant upgrade to Scott Stadium. Not, we're talking about, because we talked earlier, Scott, about the scoreboard. I think it's a $20 million project, $25 million project. That's the scoreboard. I mean, there was an infrastructure project done to expand the stadium capacity back in 98, 99. Now it's about $100 million in those dollars. When inflation value of that's a couple $100 million. So that's invested, and then, the $80 million for the football ops center. I mean, that money is sunk money. We've already spent the money. You could tear the stadium down. That's, you can put houses in there. The football ops center, you could turn into a general student center of some sort. You get some value out of that. But I mean, all the money that's gone into football over the years, you're not going to just shut the football program down. So if you're not going to just shut it down, your other options are continue winning 3 games a year. And it's hard to imagine, no matter who the coach is, that given the current realities in terms of the admission standards, that we're going to get any coach who could. Nick Saban, if you don't give him the ability to get more than 10 or 12 players in a year who can compete with his former Alabama teams, who had 50 players that could compete with Alabama teams, Nick Saban's not going to win 10 games, 9 games, 8 games at UVA. So if you're going to look at the money we've invested, in all the facilities. You want to look at the time and effort we've spent, um, figure out a way to make some money off of that money. And it can help everybody. It can help maybe that's the sales pitch, Scott. Maybe that's what we need to say. If we are better at football, we can be even better at women's swimming, which has won 4 straight national titles. It has half the U.S. women's swimming team from the trial this week. It seems like we can be even better at men's tennis. We can be even better at men's lacrosse. We could be even give Brian O'Connor even more to work with and take teams to Omaha. If we are better at football, it can help everybody be better. I'm the guy, Scott, who used to always say that degree hanging on my wall above my head here is too valuable to me to water down by letting guys in, except guys or gals in that don't meet the standards. Um, you know what? I'm also the UVA guy who says what drew me to UVA was that we want to be the best at everything. I want to be the best at football, just like I want UVA to be the best at men's basketball, women's basketball. Coach Mox, go for it this year. I want to go to Omaha every year. Um, I want to see our Olympic swimmers do well in Paris this year and in future years. So if we're going to play football, Scott, play football. If you're not, don't even try.
Yeah, and we're as you said, we're this successful in all those other sports with a football program that is just bringing in a fraction of the revenue that it could bring in. You start filling Scott Stadium, start getting more national attention. Think of the revenue, the extra the revenue that you
I
can utilize for other sports.
The number from Sportico.com has a great database. You can look at all the public schools in the country. You can look at what their books are, and they make it very easy on that website. So I'll definitely recommend anybody who's interested in this topic. But if you're this far into this podcast, you're interested in this topic. Sportico says that we sold about $7.5 million of tickets in football the last couple of years, each year. Virginia Tech, who has been just as struggling in the win-loss column as Virginia the last few years, $15 million, double that of what Virginia sold with their fledgling flailing program. So their fans still buy tickets. Our fans aren't buying tickets. If we can double what we make off football ticket sales, that's $7.5 million more a year. We're breaking even now, barely breaking even. We can invest some more money in, again, women's swimming, men's tennis, men's and women's lacrosse. I mean, you name the sport, field hockey, which went to the Final Four this year. Damn, it's just logical. And also at the same time, we're getting kids in school and giving them a chance to get a UVA degree and change their lives. It's not like we're just exploiting them for nothing. We're giving them a chance to make the world a better place.
Yep, that's for sure. And to me, it's a no brainer. I don't know why it's so difficult for a few to accept that you got to connect that last dot. That's as simple as it is. That last dot seemingly is just make it a little easier to get some of these kids in.
And we're not, like you said, Scott, we're not saying just let anybody in. We're saying
Yeah.
take into account the hard work that it takes to be a good athlete. And still, I mean, there's still things like, we want character kids. We want kids who are going to value that opportunity to come to UVA and make a difference in the world through their education. We want kids who are going to work hard when they get there and get a degree in 4 years or 5 years, as the case may be. I mean, we don't want to be, I don't want to, God, I don't want to get into any trouble here at the end of a podcast and mention any schools by name, but we don't want to become a school where the kids all end up on the arrest logs and are given bad names. And, I am an alum and hear a kid on an interview and say, I can't believe that kid got into UVA. We don't want that kind of thing. But man, there's plenty of kids out there that we can get that we're not getting now, that Michigan's getting now, that Penn State's getting now, that Clemson, just out of our own backyard, just out of Richmond, just out of 757, just out of Northern Virginia, that we're losing out on because the admissions folks are just a little snooty. I mean, just what it
Yeah.
is. That's just all it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a polite way of saying it. And you wonder why we're not recruiting the state so well. Maybe it's because our current coaching staff knows that it's just spinning their wheels going after kids that they know aren't going to qualify. They're not going to go out and do another Mike or Coach Grow and recruit kids that won't get admitted just to say I told you so. That's not going to help. So that could be a big reason right there.
I kind of wish he'd do. I wish Tony Elliott would do it. I mean, I wish he'd do it.
Well, he'd
I'm
like
all
to keep
for it.
his job. He would like to probably keep his job.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that, but um, I wish he would do it just to prove the point because apparently that message didn't get through when Al Groh did it, and Al Groh's an alum, so yeah, it probably wouldn't be good for Tony to do it.
And
Uh,
it cost Al his job.
it eventually did cost Al his job because we
And
lost
and,
guys. Yeah,
and when he was recruiting those kids, he'd had some good seasons.
yeah. 2000 going into 2006, he had not had a losing season yet. Yeah, we had he had the two Tire Bowl wins, the win down in the Music City Bowl that you went to, I know in 2005. Those were some pretty good teams. Those were some pretty good teams.
Yeah. Well, so that's it.
Well,
So
we've solved the problems of the
we've
world.
solved all the problems. Yep.
If there was an election for president of UVA, I would run. I wouldn't win because, Ahmad Hawkins would probably, uh, sully my name with something. And then Mike Barber would write about the fringe media. But man, I would have some good stump speeches anyway.
I just saw it, not just saw a message come across my computer that the current UVA director of deputy of athletic academics, or I believe it was Ed Scott, has resigned to take the AD position at Memphis.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's a step up.
He's
That's a
been
good.
there since 2022, January of 2022. So,
If you're going to go up
um,
to be the actual AD, that's a pretty good step. So,
right, he's the new AD at Memphis University, which is maybe one of those schools that we weren't going to mention by name, but um,
they could use somebody with a UVA pedigree to help clean things up there. Let's
yeah,
be
but
nice and say
I
it
have
that
a
way.
feeling that they're not asking him to come in to clean things up.
Maybe they
They kind
are.
of like things just the way they are.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you get to a because Penny Hardaway. We played Memphis in basketball this year. They whooped the crap out of our basketball team. They didn't make the tournament. I don't if I recall that correctly.
They
Um,
did not.
they
But I
they
also read something about to tell you all you need to know about that is that one of their players was like going to be suspended for a couple of weeks, was going to be unavailable because he was serving a jail sentence.
that'll make you unavailable.
So don't
But
think that's going to happen at Virginia.
I was reading about so I brought up Penny Hardaway in that context because so he didn't make the tournament again this year, and I think he's made one tournament and played in one tournament game in like 7 years there. But I was reading a story on one of the websites that I subscribe to, I think it was Athletic, about the top transfer portal recruiting classes, and the story had Memphis in the like top 15 or something like that, and it said, "Wow, Penny Hardaway does it again," and I'm thinking to myself, "What's he done again?" He's played in one NCAA tournament game in 7 years, and he lost it, of course. So, great. He recruits great. He didn't win with them. So, yeah, maybe the Memphis people are like, yeah, uh, maybe we need to do something different.
Yeah, yeah. The wacky world of college athletics.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is indeed. Well,
That's why I think sometimes it's a lot better to just follow the professional ranks because they're all playing on the same level field
they're
to
not
some
though.
degree.
They're
They're
not.
not,
No,
but
there's big
you think
market
they are.
teams, and there's big market teams and medium market teams and small market teams that might as well be minor league teams in our beloved baseball. No, the Yankees and Dodgers get everybody. I mean, no, they're the Alabama of the MLB, and it's the same in basketball and whatever. It's fun. So for me, I still harbor some illusion, entertain some illusion that the college sports is still somewhat pure. It's at least more pure than still, even with all the NIL money and everything else, transfer portal and all that, is still more pure than pro sports. But um, the one thing they can't do to me, like they can trade my favorite player from the Nats, but they can't trade Cavman. They can't trade my degree hanging on the wall. Well, however long I'm here, I'm going to be right rooting for and criticizing UVA athletics at the same time. So
Well, just help connect that last dot.
that's going to be a mission. I got about a month before football practice starts. We'll see if we can get that going here. Um, well, Scott, good podcast, man. Good to have you back on. And
Yeah,
it's good.
we need to do this and talk a little bit about UVA baseball because that's another topic we can delve into. Brian's got his work cut out for him again in the transfer portal.
Yeah, yeah. I had an update on a couple of pitchers that were signed. One guy who had an impressive resume from junior college baseball. But yeah, we'll talk. But get on there next week. Hopefully, some more signings next week. We need more arms, no doubt about that. So yeah, some baseball, and then it won't be too long before we're getting down to Charlotte for the kickoff, and we could probably got some ACC conference alignment stuff to talk about because this is the silly season where sports writers get bored and start making up crap about who's leaving now. Um, so we'll
Yeah,
be
well,
having
we
some of
could.
that
Hey, it
coming
could
up.
be worse. I saw where 27 members of the Campbell University baseball team are in the transfer portal.
27. There's probably like 30 guys on the team.
Yeah,
So yeah,
their head
that's
coach left, and as soon as he left, the entire team transferred or is in the portal.
I was looking at I use d1baseball.com for they have a really good baseball transfer portal. I was at the Virginia Tech series, Virginia, the last regular season series. So I should know some of the names, but Virginia Tech had a bunch of guys go in the portal. I want to say 8 or 10 guys. Now, I don't
Yes.
know if that's bench guys or a combination of bench guys and some regulars or just a bunch of regulars. I'll have to kind of do some analysis there, but there were a lot of names.
Yeah, a couple of them were starters, a couple of starting position players. Um, but
I was
I'm so
surprised
sorry.
that I was surprised we lost Chase Hungate.
Yeah, that's a mystery. I don't understand that either. But
Because
you know,
he was not it was not because he wasn't being used. He was our number one. I mean, he wasn't the closer, but he was the most important bullpen guy we had this year.
yeah. So we can talk about that the next time.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get some baseball talk next time. Well, for Scott German, I'm Chris Graham signing off. If you have any questions for me, any criticisms, email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.